Ever been curious about that digital money everyone seems to be talking about?
Yeah, cryptocurrency.
Exactly. Today, we're diving headfirst into it. We've gathered, well, a bunch of different resources.
I would like a cheat sheet, maybe.
Yeah, a cheat sheet to understand this whole world, from the real nitty-gritty of blockchain tech.
Yeah.
We looked at a quick note for that.
Right, and some broader stuff, too.
And broader views, yeah. Wikipedia, Investopedia, Coursera, CoinLedger, Corporate Finance Institute, the whole shebang.
So the mission really is just to break it down.
That's it. Boil down the essentials so you can finally get a handle on crypto without needing, a PhD in computer science.
Right. We're definitely aiming for clarity here, trying to cut through some of the complexity.
Hopefully by the end of this deep dive, you'll have a much clearer picture of what cryptocurrency actually is.
And the pretty fascinating tech that makes it all work.
Okay, so to get us started, let's use an analogy. One of the guides mentioned thinking about it like a shared journal.
Ah, yeah, I saw that one. Like, everyone has a copy.
Kind of. Every crypto transaction is an entry in this journal, once it's written down, and importantly, everyone agrees it's accurate.
Then it's permanent. You can't erase it.
Exactly. Unerasable. And this idea, this shared unchangeable record, it's really like the core of how crypto works.
Now, what's kind of revolutionary about that shared journal idea is that no single person, no bank, no institution controls it.
Right, that's the decentralization thing.
That's the essence of it. And while it could potentially make finance more democratic, by cutting out the traditional gatekeepers.
So let's define it then. What is this stuff, cryptocurrency?
Well, based on those sources like Coursera and Wikipedia, it's basically a digital form of payment. It exists purely online.
Unlike, say, a dollar bill, which represents something physical.
Precisely. It's mostly used for online transactions, though sometimes you see it pop up for physical things too.
But the key difference, the real kicker, seems to be that decentralization. No central bank, no government is pulling the strings.
And that lack of central control it's a huge deal. It means transactions could be faster, potentially cheaper.
Because you're cutting out the middleman.
Exactly. You remove that intermediary layer that you have with traditional banking.
Okay, and the technology making all this decentralized magic happen is blockchain, right?
That's the one. All the sources point to blockchain as the underlying system. It verifies and records every single crypto transaction.
So think of it like a digital ledger. Or maybe a huge shared spreadsheet.
Yeah, both work. It's a constantly growing list of records called blocks, all linked together and secured using cryptography.
Cryptography sounds serious.
Oh, it is. It's key. And this ledger, it's public, everyone can see it, but no single person can just go in and change things by themselves once a block is added and confirmed.
It's out there, permanent.
Pretty much, yeah. It's inherently resistant to modification, which is a major feature. It builds trust because the record isn't held by one entity, it's verified by the whole network.
Instead of just trusting, say, your bank's records.
Exactly. The network itself validates everything.
Okay, let's walk through a transaction then. Say I want to send some hypothetical crypto to you. What happens behind the scenes?
Okay. So your transaction includes the key details. Your digital wallet address, my address, the amount you're sending, and a timestamp.
Spam and stuff.
Right. Then these individual transactions, they get bundled together, grouped into these blocks.
Within a certain time limit.
Yeah, and that time frame can vary. Different blockchains, different block times.
Gotcha. So these blocks are like digital containers for transactions.
A good way to put it. They hold a batch of transactions that have been proposed. Then the network has to agree that everything in that block is legit.
Before it gets added to the permanent record.
Exactly, before it becomes part of the official blockchain.
And this adding to the chain idea, it's pretty literal, huh?
It really is. These new validated blocks get linked mathematically to the previous block in the chain.
Creating a continuous chain of blocks, hence blockchain.
You got it. And then every computer, every node on the network updates its own copy of this whole chain.
So everyone has the same up-to-date record.
That's the goal. Each addition, each modification is essentially a new transaction recorded across the network.
And because everyone holds a copy, it makes it really robust, right? Like if I tried to cheat on my copy.
The other nodes would see it instantly. They compare your version to theirs, see the discrepancy, and reject your fraudulent change. It maintains the integrity of the whole system.
Makes sense. Now, you mentioned security. One source, QuickNode, talked about a whole system working behind the scenes to keep things secure, especially in what they called a trustless environment.
Right. Because you don't need to trust a central party, you need to trust the system itself. And there are several key components to that security.
Okay, let's unpack those. First up was something called a transaction hash. What's that? Like a digital fingerprint.
That's a perfect analogy. A transaction hash is a unique identifier for every single transaction.
Unique hash.
It's generated by taking all the details of the transaction sender, receiver, amount, timestamp, everything, and running it through a special mathematical function, a hashing algorithm.
Okay.
And the output, the hash, is completely unique to that specific set of details. If you changed even one tiny thing, like the amount by a fraction,
The hash would be totally different.
completely different, which makes it super easy to see if anyone's tried to tamper with the transaction data after the fact.
So every single transaction gets its own unique tamper-proof stamp. Cool. Now, let's zoom in on the blocks themselves. You said they're like packages of validated transactions.
Right, and they have specific components. The main one is the block header.
The header, what information is packed in there?
It's like the block's metadata or control panel. It includes things like the software version number, crucially, the hash of the previous block.
Ah, so that's the link. That's how they form the chain.
Exactly, that's the cryptographic link. It also has something called the Merkle tree root hash.
Whoa, sounds complex.
It's basically a cryptographic summary of all the transactions inside that specific block. Also a timestamp, a difficulty target, we'll get to that, and something called a nonce.
A nonce.
Yeah, it's essentially a random number that miners use when they're trying to create the block.
Okay, that's a lot of crucial info in just the header. And then I assume there's the list of transactions.
Yep, the transaction list itself. Pretty straightforward, just all the transactions included in that block.
And finally, the block hash. How's that different from the transaction hash?
Good question. The block hash is the unique identifier for the entire block, not just one transaction.
Okay, so the whole package gets a fingerprint too.
Right, and it's generated by hashing the block header, all that metadata we just talked about. And here's the key part. This block hash has to meet certain criteria set by the network.
Criteria, like what?
This relates to the difficulty target mentioned in the header. Basically, the hash has to look a certain way, like starting with a specific number of zeros. Finding a hash like that requires a lot of computational work.
Ah, so it's deliberately hard to create a valid block hash.
Exactly. That difficulty is what secures the network, especially in proof-of-work systems.
Got it. So unique hashes for transactions, unique, hard to create hashes for blocks, all linked together, very secure. Now, who's doing all this computing? The nodes, right?
Right. The nodes are the computers actually running the blockchain network. Think back to the shared journal analogy. The nodes are the journal keepers.
And they each hold a full copy of the ledger.
The full nodes do, yes. They have the entire transaction history. But there are different types of nodes.
Like what?
Well, for example, in proof-of-stake systems, you have validator nodes. Their job is specifically to validate transactions and create new blocks.
Based on how much crypto they staked.
Often, yes. Staking means locking up some of their own crypto as collateral, basically showing they have skin in the game. Then there are also lightweight nodes.
Lightweight.
Yeah, they don't download the entire blockchain, which can be huge. They just download the block headers.
Just the metadata.
Exactly. It lets them verify transactions without needing massive storage. They rely on the full nodes for the complete data, if needed.
Okay, specialized roles. Makes sense. Now here's a big question. How do all these different computers, these nodes, all agree on which transactions are valid and which block is next? It sounds like potential chaos.
It would be without rules. That's where consensus mechanisms come in. The sources all highlighted these.
Consensus mechanisms, the rules of the road for the blockchain.
Precisely. They are the protocols that let all the distributed nodes reach an agreement or consensus on the current state of the blockchain.
So everyone's journal stays synchronized and accurate.
Exactly. It's how the network collectively decides what the single source of truth is, even without a central authority telling them. It's fundamental for trust in a decentralized system.
And the two big ones seem to be proof of work, POW, and proof of stake, POS.
Those are the most common, yeah.
Well, let's start with proof of work. How does that work? I think Wikipedia and CoinLedger mentioned this one.
Right. So in proof of work, you have miners. These aren't people with pickaxes, obviously.
Right, computers.
Yeah, powerful computers, often specialized hardware. They compete to solve a really complex computational puzzle.
The puzzle related to finding that difficult block hash we talked about.
Exactly that. They're essentially trying trillions of possibilities until one finds a hash for for the next block that meets the network's difficulty target
And the first one to find it.
gets to add their proposed block of transactions to the blockchain. And as a reward for doing all that work, the proof of work, they usually get some newly created cryptocurrency.
Ah, so that's the mining part, digging for new coins.
Sort of, yeah. It's the incentive. But it requires a ton of computational power and, consequently, a lot of electricity.
Yeah, I've heard the criticisms about energy consumption.
It's a significant drawback for sure.
Okay, so that's proof of work,
Mm.
a computational race.
Yeah.
What about the alternative? Proof of stake. How is that different?
Proof of stake takes a different approach. Instead of relying on raw computing power, it relies on, well, stake.
The amount of crypto someone holds and locks up.
Exactly. You have validators instead of miners. These validators lock up or stake their own cryptocurrency as collateral.
Okay.
Then, the network chooses a validator to propose the next block. The chance of being chosen is often proportional to the amount they've staked. More stake, higher chance.
So it's less about energy-intensive computation and more about financial commitment.
That's a good way to think about it. You're essentially betting on the network's success with your own assets. If you try to cheat, you could lose your staked coins. It's seen as more energy efficient.
Interesting trade-off. Okay, so underpinning all this, the hashes, the blocks, the consensus is cryptography, right?
Absolutely. Cryptography and hashing are the bedrock. We touched on hashing for IDs.
Right, the unique fingerprints for transactions and blocks.
And remember, each block contains the hash of the previous one. That's what makes the chain secure. Tampering with an old block would change its hash.
Which would break the link to the next block because its header contains the original hash.
Exactly. The inconsistency would be immediately obvious to the entire network. Hashing provides that integrity and makes the chain tamper evident. Plus, comparing short hashes is way faster than comparing huge blocks of data.
Efficient and secure. Okay, what about the other cryptographic part? Key pair, or public key cryptography.
Right, this is crucial for actually making transactions securely between peers. It uses asymmetric cryptography. Meaning each participant has two related keys, a public key and a private key.
Public and private. What's the difference?
Your public key can be shared freely. In fact, it's used to generate your blockchain address, the address people use to send crypto to you.
Okay, so that's like my crypto mailing address.
Exactly. But your private key must be kept absolutely secret. It's like your password or your signature.
What does the private key do?
It's used to digitally sign transactions from your address. When you want to send crypto, your wallet software uses your private key to create a unique digital signature for that specific transaction.
Proving it's really me sending it.
Precisely. The network can use your public key to verify that the signature was created by the corresponding private key without ever needing to see the private key itself.
Wow. So I can prove ownership and authorize payments without revealing my secret key.
That's the beauty of it. Public key for receiving, a private key for sending and authorizing.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, to actually manage these keys and interact with the blockchain, I need a wallet, right? What exactly is a crypto wallet? Is it like my leather wallet?
Not quite. It's easy to think that way, but a crypto wallet doesn't actually hold your coins like a physical wallet holds cash.
Oh, so where are my coins then?
Your coins, your crypto assets, actually exist as records on the blockchain itself. The wallet is more like a tool, a piece of software or hardware.
That manages my keys.
Exactly. It securely stores your private keys and allows you to use them to view your balance, receive funds to your public address, and sign transactions to send funds.
So it's less of a container and more of a secure keychain and interface.
That's a much better analogy. It's your secure gateway to accessing and controlling your funds on the blockchain.
Got it. Now, we mostly talk about Bitcoin, but there are lots of different cryptocurrencies, aren't there?
Oh, thousands. And they fall into different categories.
What are the main types we should be aware of?
Well, first you have the ones like Bitcoin, which are often called fungible tokens.
Fungible.
Meaning each unit is interchangeable with any other unit. Like $1 is the same as any other dollar. One Bitcoin is the same as any other Bitcoin.
Standard digital cash, basically. What else?
Then you have stablecoins. These are designed specifically to minimize price volatility.
How do they do that?
They're usually pegged to a stable asset, most commonly a fiat currency like the US dollar or the euro. The idea is that one stablecoin should always be worth, say, $1.
So they try to provide the benefits of crypto, like fast transfers without the wild price swings?
That's the goal, yeah. To be a stable store of value and medium of exchange within the crypto ecosystem.
Okay, fungible tokens, stable coins, any other major categories?
Well, you also hear about meme coins. These often start as internet jokes or based on memes, like Dogecoin.
Ah, right, I've heard of that one.
Yeah. They tend to be extremely volatile and sometimes associated with scams, so caution is advised there.
Good to know. Anything else?
Just briefly, there's also the concept of physical crypto. These are actual physical coins, sometimes made of metal, that might be sold as collectibles or promotional items.
Do they have value?
Sometimes they have a private key embedded that controls a certain amount of actual cryptocurrency. But the physical object itself usually doesn't hold the inherent value. It's more about the associated digital asset or just the novelty.
Interesting distinction. Okay, let's circle back to mining for a second.
Yeah.
We talked about it in proof of work as transaction validation.
Right, solving those complex puzzles.
But some sources mention it's also how new cryptocurrency gets created, right?
Right.
Not just a reward, but the actual minting process.
That's correct, specifically for many proof of work coins like Bitcoin. When miners successfully validate a block, the reward they receive often includes newly created coins that didn't exist before.
So they're adding to the total supply.
Exactly. That's the mechanism for introducing new currency into the system in a controlled, predictable way. They use specialized hardware hashing algorithms like SHA-256 for Bitcoin.
To add those new blocks and get rewarded.
Right. But it's worth noting, as some sources pointed out, not all crypto is mined. Some have a fixed supply created at launch. Others use proof of stake, where new coins might be distributed differently, perhaps as staking rewards.
And mining has gotten harder over time, hasn't it?
Immensely harder. In the early days of Bitcoin, you could mine on a regular laptop. Now it requires huge investments in specialized hardware, ASICs, and massive amounts of electricity, leading to those energy concerns we mentioned.
Right. Okay, one last piece then. Transaction verification. Let's just quickly recap the flow.
Sure. So a transaction starts when someone uses their private key to digitally sign it.
Proving they authorize it.
Yep. Then it gets broadcast to the network, sent out to all the nodes,
The nodes then collect these pending transactions.
and group them into potential blocks. Then the consensus mechanism, whether it's miners racing in POW or validators being chosen in POS, kicks in to validate one of these blocks.
And once a block is validated and added to the chain,
It's considered confirmed, and each subsequent block added after that provides another confirmation for your original transaction.
why are those extra confirmations important?
They dramatically increase the security and finality of the transaction. Each confirmation makes it exponentially harder, practically impossible, to reverse or tamper with the earlier transaction.
Preventing that double spending problem, using the same money twice.
Exactly. The more confirmations, the more certain everyone can be that the transaction is permanent and legitimate.
Okay, wow. That was quite a journey through the fundamentals.
We definitely covered a lot. From the basic idea of digital currency to blockchain, transactions, security, consensus, wallets, different types.
Yeah, hopefully that gives everyone a much more solid footing.
A good foundation, we hope, for understanding this whole digital asset space.
So if we were to boil it all down, like the absolute core takeaway,
It's that cryptocurrency relies on this decentralized, transparent, and secure digital ledger, the blockchain,
transactions get bundled into blocks, cryptographically secured.
validated by a whole network of computers following agreed-upon rules, the consensus mechanisms.
And all underpinned by clever cryptography hashing and those public-private key pairs to ensure security and prove ownership.
And maybe a surprising detail to think about is how that structure, that chain of signed, agreed-upon records, fundamentally shifts where trust comes from.
How so?
Well, instead of trusting a bank or a company, you're trusting the network itself, the code, the mathematics. Trust is distributed, not centralized.
That really does have big implications, doesn't it? For how we think about data, security, even value itself.
It really does.
And for you, listening in, hopefully understanding these fundamentals gives you a much better base for navigating this world. Whether you're looking at investments, curious about future tech, or just want to be informed.
Knowing how it actually works, how transactions are secured and verified, should give you more confidence and maybe less confusion when you hear about crypto.
Definitely less confusion. So maybe a final thought to leave everyone with.
Okay. Well, given that this technology is built to be decentralized, resistant to censorship, and it's increasingly bumping up against traditional finance and global economics,
Yeah.
what are the really long-term societal implications if value and important records start being managed this way globally? Is this truly a fundamental shift in how we handle information and exchange value?
That is definitely something to chew on. A potential paradigm shift. Lots to think about there.